Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 163 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in the vomitorium with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David. It's C. Noe.
It is
right?
C.
David
yes.
C. Noe. And I'm wondering.
For Cyclops.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Excellent. And I'm wondering how you're doing today.
I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah?
Yes. I'm undergoing some medical. What do we call these? Interveniences? What's the word I'm looking for?
Interventions?
There you go.
Okay.
Some medical interventions.
Yes.
Got to get some vaccinations. Going to be doing some international travel.
Fantastic.
So I got to make sure that I am protected against all sorts of vectors that might want to do me harm.
Right. So you've been getting jabs left and right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some uppercuts.
Right.
Roundhouse.
Yeah. Running the gauntlet. Fantastic.
You're right. So we're down here in the bunker, Vomitorium South, the basement of the RHB Bindery Coffee House and Bookstore. And how are you doing, Jeff? You're looking plaid, I have to say, and autumnal.
I'm feeling plaid and autumnal today. I'm liking the colors out there. I'm liking kind of the bite in the air.
Yes, you like that? It's cold this morning.
It was. I like it. It's fall around here is wonderful, but it's also way too short.
Yes.
So I'm trying to soak it in while I can.
We've had quite a long summer, though. I mean, a record number of days over the temperature of 75.
Yep.
That's unbelievable.
It is. Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah, but it's nice to finally feel some of that chill.
And it's nice to get back into the vomitorium.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of weeks.
We've
been busy with travel and other sorts of things.
Yep.
I had to go down to Texas and teach some Latin for Baylor University there in Waco.
Yeah.
Stop in and see Chip and Joanna. You know them?
The house people, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Magnolia. I didn't actually see them.
Right.
But
that's where they're from,
that's
right?
where they are.
Yeah,
that's right.
How was that down at Baylor?
It went really well. Yes, I got to teach Latin alongside one Patrick M. Owens and Laura Eit and David White and some others, some good friends. Had some wonderful students. I learned a little bit. I hope the students learned something too.
Was this spoken Latin thing?
Yes, it was.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the theme was, let's see, ridentem dicere verdum, which means tell the truth while you're laughing. It's a quote from Terence or Plautus. I don't remember which.
Yeah.
Doesn't that kind of encapsulate what we try to do here on our little podcast?
Absolutely. I like that. I like that
dispense
phrase.
some info, but do it with a chuckle.
That's right. Yeah. So today, Dave, we are getting back into Marrou,
yes.
right? His history of education in antiquity.
That's right.
And today we're tackling his chapter on artistic education.
That's right. So there'll be some finger painting, maybe some potato prints, things like that.
Yeah, so much potato printing.
Yeah. I looked back through our catalog and I found out we haven't dealt with Marrou since August 13.
Okay, so
that's a full 2 months.
It's been a while.
It's time to get back at it. And speaking of, distant memories, I was thinking a little bit about some of the television shows that I watched as a child.
Yes, okay.
And I think probably they're very similar to the ones that you did.
I'm sure.
They're similar in age. So I was thinking back to people like Ralph Malph.
Yep.
And Potsy and Richie.
Of course.
And Chachi and so forth.
Yeah.
And what's the fellow's name? Tom Bosley. Who does he play?
He plays Mr. Cunningham.
Mr. Cunningham and Mrs. Cunningham.
Yes.
Right. And I was thinking, there has to be a lot of nostalgia for shows like that rocked around the clock. Maybe I can capitalize on this. Maybe I can make some money off of it.
Okay.
So I put together a little plan, a scheme, you might say. And I thought maybe if I can find other fans of the show and I can send them each $5.
Yes.
So I'll send 2 fans $5, and then what they need to do is find 2 other fans each that will send me $2, but then they keep the 3.
Yes.
Then those 4 people find another 2 each, and it goes on. And soon we have a large geometrical kind of structure of people,
okay.
and I'm sitting at the top of it.
Now listen,
as the Happy Days fan, receiving all this money. Doesn't that sound good?
It sounds a little illegal.
Oh, that's right. It's a Fonzie scheme.
Man. Did that occur? Did you put that together as you were walking down the stairs?
I don't know when it came to me. I think it was while I was sitting on the plane on the way back from from Texas.
Were you watching
reruns? Had nothing to do with anything.
It just kind of popped into your head.
Yes, and that's what leads me to believe that although it's a new low of stupidity, let's be honest, Fonzie, Ponzi,
yes.
It's a new low of stupidity. It does lead me to believe that things like this are pure inspiration.
Yes.
I mean, not inspired in that was an inspired interpretation. This is dumb, I'll admit it.
Right.
But I have no idea where it came from or why.
Yes.
It just inserted itself into my fervid brain. And, and there we go.
It's fantastic.
Isn't that odd?
It's like you'll often hear songwriters and musicians will say like their best songs or their favorite songs were ones that they wrote in 5 minutes.
Right.
It just kind of they're overcome and it's in their brain and it's out.
Okay, I got to be honest.
Yeah.
It's not an all-time stupid joke. There's a little chuckle in there.
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yes. So Dave, before we get into the topic of the day, we do have
it's almost a corrigendum.
It feels like a corrigendum, even though our corrector says it's not.
If it were coming from Tom Flynn, this would be a corrigendum. Let's be honest.
Capital C.
That's right. But this is coming from Will Fitzgerald.
Right, we've heard from this guy before.
Yeah, he's a domestic corrector, you might say. While Tom is in Australia,
right.
Will is nearby, keeping an eye on us. So what does he say, Jeff?
He says this is not really a corrigendum. We'll see.
Do we believe him?
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll see. He says, but you might be interested in knowing that the death of William Henry Harrison, we were talking about
as a president.
Yeah, right.
Did I tell you I was interacting? Did I tell the audience this already?
What?
I was interacting with Will online a little bit, and he said, apparently I'm in some kind of a race to be most annoying.
What?
Yeah, and I said, Will, it's no competition. You're way ahead. He thought he was competing with Tom.
I see.
Go ahead.
Right. So he says, you might be interested in knowing that the death of William Henry Harrison might not, in fact, have been caused by his speaking outdoors in the cold and wet for his inaugural. Right. So this famous detail that he died within a month or about a month after he gave his endless speech
about all the dead consuls.
Right.
I think that was you, Jeff. So if this is a corrigendum, it's aimed at you.
Right. Exactly. All right. I'll take full responsibility. He goes on. His death just 32 days after the inauguration pushes a post hoc ergo propter hoc, that sounds like Latin, explanation. The official cause of death was pneumonia, and even the attending physician later said that it might not have been the proximate cause of death. In 2014, an article in the journal Clinical Infectious Diseases. Does Will subscribe to?
I think he does. I've never been to his home, but I imagine there's a big stack of clinical infectious diseases, right? Burying the television.
Right on his nightstand, it's piled up. Right. Mm-hmm. So in the journal, Clinical Infectious Diseases suggested the cause of death was septic shock due to enteric fever.
I bet that's a page turner.
He's already lost me. Do you have any idea what enteric fever is?
It's a fever on the inside.
Okay, all right.
It enters through you, maybe.
It's self-caused by bacteria in contaminated drinking water. Sewage was regularly dumped upstream from the White House. My goodness.
Sewage and the White House, huh?
Huh. If you would like to read more, boy.
This corrigendum comes with a reading list.
The best source I found was the article, What Killed William Henry Harrison? And listeners, if you're really interested, we can send you the link.
Really?
Right.
Okay. Then he gives us the link. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes on. You want to finish this up?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then Will says, although the articles didn't say it, the relatively primitive state of medicine was also a cause, I think. Trying to, quote, balance his humors was still a thing. Although he was too weak for bloodletting, they still blistered his skin. So imagine that conversation. Can we put a number of leeches on him? No, he's too weak.
He's too weak.
All right, we'll just blister up his skin then.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't yet have a germ theory of disease.
Huh. Wow. That's a lot of info. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, you got to say thank you.
I do. Thank you. I sit here mildly corrected, I would say. Right. And just to remind our audience, where in the world is this coming from? So on a fairly recent episode, it was from Richard's book.
Yes, the golden age of the classics in America.
And this inaugural speech, which may or may not have killed Harrison, he talks about a number of Roman consuls.
That's correct. Yes. And that led him to be outside too long. And the theory is he died of, some exposure. But Will's theory is that someone was trying to balance his humors.
Yes.
Which, may I say, is something else we do on this podcast all the time.
Exactly.
We balance humors.
Right. And we try to stay away from drinking large goblets of sewage water.
That's correct. So, Jeff, for Henri-Irénée Marrou.
Yes.
I think you have our opening quote today.
Yes, the quote does not come from Marrou. I think we've actually quoted from this author, Mary Gourant, before in another chapter on Marrou. It's from an article called Three Aspects of Music in Ancient China and Greece.
Interesting.
And she writes, ethical considerations were primary in the Chinese and Greek attitudes towards music, and the study of music was given paramount importance in both educational systems. Plato, like Confucius, advocated the study of music because of its moral value. They both realized that the science of governing men was dependent on the skill used in guiding and controlling their passions, and considered music the ideal tool with which to accomplish this end. Thus, the molding of character appears to have been the single most important function of music. This, in turn, was based on metaphysical aspects such as the belief that music represented the ideal order and is the image of the universe, or that it typified the harmony between heaven and earth.
That's really interesting.
Now, Marrou talks about this near the end of this, and he more or less dismisses this.
Yeah, he poo-poos it.
He poo-poos it. I'm not so sure, right? I mean, I think maybe this idea of certain modes of music are more moral than others. Okay, I can accept kind of on the face of it absurdity, but the idea that certain types of music can certainly inflame or subdue parts of you is incontrovertible.
Yes, it is incontrovertible. It can't be controverted.
Right.
If I'm having a bad day, which is any day between, say, Monday and the following Tuesday, invariably my mood can be improved by listening to blues.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Excellent.
Do you have that experience also?
Right. It made me think of being in the locker room before a basketball game, and we would before we went on the floor, we weren't going to play Barry Manilow.
No, it's the Snow White soundtrack.
What?
No, you're listening to something.
It's like AC/DC.
Something driving.
Exactly.
Something with a beat. Something loud
to
and
pump you up. Right?
High tempo.
Right.
And when I'm in a very good mood and I want something melodic and sweet, then I listen to the Haydn piano sonatas or something like that, because they're so melodious. They're so beautiful.
Right. So this foreshadows a bit of where Marrou is going in this chapter, and he talks about how ultimately music fades from the kind of the curricula in Hellenistic and Roman schools, and part of the reason was that this idea that music can shape our morals and passions is eventually seen as something kind of fundamentally archaic, and is ultimately just kind of dispensed with.
I think that music in Rome in particular began to fade significantly with the rise of that very famous musician, Curtis Cobainus.
Oh yes, the grungiest movement.
Yes, that's right. So chapter 4 of Marrou.
Yes.
This is chapter 4 of section 2. Right. So this is a large book, and we're going to march all the way through it, as we all know, right? Part 2 of the book is classical education in the Hellenistic age.
Right. And
this is chapter 4 of part 2, entitled simply Artistic Education.
Yep.
Jeff, is it okay if I read the opening sentence here?
Please.
Sentences. Says Marrou, quote, "Traditionally, artistic education meant instruction in music, but music was not the only one of the fine arts taught at school. Greek education, reflecting, as we should expect, the development of culture as a whole, also included the plastic arts by introducing drawing lessons into its syllabus."
Now, I think one of the things that I found, this chapter, I thought it was very interesting, but it also it was a bit of a letdown too.
Yeah, it's brief.
At least as in a couple of places, Marrou says, in fact, on this page, little is known about this subject.
Right.
And so it felt like, okay, we have to try to fill in these gaps somehow. But
but if you check the footnotes, he's done his homework.
Yes.
I mean, there are lots of references I would not have thought of citing for this kind of thing.
True.
That's why he's the expert. And
True.
You can, through a good deal of effort, stitch something together.
Right.
Because I think people are interested in the topic. What can you do if the sources are thin? Right.
And I think the other thing this is no fault of Marrou, but it kind of, I think there's a lot of modern corollaries here.
Okay.
That, I think about my own music education.
Right.
And I think
I thought you were entirely self-taught.
Well, I am.
Okay.
But the music and when I ended up, my love of music did not come from my music education, which I find really quite sad. And I thought that a lot of the music education that I had in middle school and high school was kind of mired in archaic ideas that don't work anymore.
But give us an example of this archaic miring.
Well, I'll tell you about a conversation I had with my 11-year-old son, who is part of a choir, and he likes singing. He likes being part of a choir, but he doesn't care for the music that they're singing, right? And it's music that the choir has sung for years and years and years and years. And so he suggested to his teacher, could we do a popular song, right? My son's favorite band is Queen. Oh. And so could we do a part of Bohemian Rhapsody? And he suggested, and it was just immediately like, that's ridiculous. Well, they didn't say that to him, but they said, well, that's really not what we do here.
I see.
And it was kind of just rejected on the face of it. Simply, I think from the standpoint is that, well, that's not real music.
Okay.
And so I would love if my son's own musical education would kind of excite them about music, but it really doesn't. And were you in band or orchestra? Did you do?
No, I wasn't in either of those. I played the piano.
Okay.
For a long time, and yet
taking lessons at home.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And yet succeeded in learning almost nothing.
Yeah.
So I think I learned a lot about music. I can't play the piano very well.
Right.
I had a really excellent teacher. This is one of my life regrets, since that's what the show was about. I did not take advantage of the fact that this teacher was really accomplished. She had state winning students. I was not one of them.
Yeah.
But won statewide piano competitions. She wanted to teach me music theory. She wanted to teach me the classics.
Yeah.
And I had zero appreciation for it and fought her on it a lot. Now, maybe the reason that I enjoy classical music now so much is because of that. But I was just always wondering, would there have been some way to lead me to it more sweetly?
Yeah.
I think it has to do primarily with the fact that it was a very small part of my life.
Yeah.
And so it was, you go there and you learn how to play the piano classically, but it has nothing to do with any of the rest of your life.
Right.
And being, a very young child, I didn't have the maturity to see beyond my immediate horizon, which was, lunch boxes and Twinkies.
Totally.
Whatever else.
That's I'm sure that's the story of so many kids, right? Now, I remember I suffered through a year of piano lessons, and I'm sure I was so annoying to my parents. I complained about it nonstop. I absolutely hated it.
Right.
And then Van Halen's Jump came out, and I was
now you want to play the piano.
Now I want to play the piano, right? And that's where I kind of embraced my love of music. It was because it was through popular music. But I think part of it too is just that, I don't know how you felt about it, but taking piano lessons just was not cool.
Yeah, it wasn't cool.
And there's this passage about Alcibiades playing the flute.
Right.
This seems like 2,500 years ago, playing the flute was just not cool.
Right.
And so it kind of fades from music education.
There are some exceptions to that. Yngwie Malmsteen, when he started ripping off Paganini and other classics, then a whole army of guitar players went and mined the classics.
Yes.
And started the neoclassical movement because they wanted to play like that.
Right.
Blazing arpeggios and so forth.
Yeah, without a doubt, yeah. Kind of prog rock kind of built a bridge between classical music and popular music.
But that sort of thing is very rare.
It is rare, yeah.
So he starts out the chapter with drawing, actually. And he says, drawing made its first appearance in liberal education, this is page 133, in Sicyon in the 4th century, under the influence of the painter Pamphilus, one of Apelles' teachers. And from Sicyon it spread to the whole of Greece. For Aristotle, it was still only an extra subject, which a few pupils took in addition to the normal curriculum of literature, gymnastics, and music.
Right.
But a century later, in about 240, the drawing teacher, the zographos, was a regular member of the teaching staff, and the subject he taught, zographia, figures as one of the subjects in the school examinations that were being held in Chios and Magnesia ad Meandrum in the 2nd century.
Yeah. So and later on in the next paragraph, he talks about how Aristotle, it's hard to kind of overstate his influence.
Yes, he's everywhere.
From here until the Renaissance. Right. He says that he saw it as a practical art, right? It says the refinement of the sense of sight and the feeling for line and form was important as part of a child's education.
Right. But, were you taught how to draw?
I mean, in as much as I had things that I did in art class.
Yeah. Did you get the box of crayons with 256 different colors and
with
the
sharpener
little thing in the back?
I love the thing in the back, the sharpener, right? Exactly.
I usually had the standard 8-pack.
Yeah.
When the other kid, I think society has changed so much. Nobody takes crayons anymore. Right now, it's who has the iPhone 16. But when I was in 3rd, 4th grade, and I had the 8-pack, and the other kid brought to school the 256 box with the sharpener in the back,
can't compete with that,
and the little holder for your coffee mug built right on the side. There's some serious envy taking place right there,
without a doubt.
Yeah,
without a doubt. Yeah. So no, I have a similar kind of misgivings about my own kind of art education.
Okay.
Too. I mean, it was. This chapter reminded me of so many things that art and music were just not considered serious. Right? And
plastic arts.
Plastic arts.
They are referred to because you're changing, molding, flexing, forming, shaping things.
Yes.
But I also wonder whether, this is not meant as a criticism to my elementary school teachers, who were all fine women, as it turns out, very generous and caring, and taught me a lot. But I sometimes wonder, did they never try to show me, hey, this is David's sculpture, Michelangelo. This is a Titian painting. This is Paul Cézanne, the still life in peaches, right? This is the Mona Lisa. Did they try to show me those things and say, yes, you're working with crayons, and that's good, but look at what could be the end result of that, what other people have done. Did they try and I never listened? Or was that not a part of the thinking and the process? Because I have to think that would have really moved me.
Yeah.
And stirred my imagination, because it does so much now. Right. You and I have seen the Sistine Chapel, and I mean, it takes your breath away.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
Now, nobody's going to be Michelangelo, but he started sketching with, a piece of charcoal.
Exactly.
And so there's a continuity, and I just never knew that continuity existed.
Right. No, I'm right there with you. I could be wrong. It's been years, of course. But,
right. Decades.
Decades. But it seems like very little art history was part of my art education. It was, we're going to do this project. This is the medium, and get to it.
In their defense, right? It was very difficult at the time to come upon those kinds of images.
Of course.
All you had was the big posters in the National Geographic.
Right.
But now you can put images on the walls so easily. With the internet and so forth.
Yeah.
But I have to think that would have really moved and inspired me.
Right.
Not that I become a great artist, but that earlier on, I take it more seriously and have an appreciation.
Yeah.
Because look at what other people have done.
Right.
Because the same thing worked with sports, right? We've already talked about your athletic adventures on a few occasions. So we don't have to go there, but
let's please not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when you're playing basketball on the court as a little kid, you are aspiring to be the next Michael Jordan or something like that.
Pretending to be.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
So why would that be limited to athletics? Why couldn't it carry over, into art and music and so forth?
I think, and I could be wrong, is that as I look back on it, I think there was definitely a vibe that art and music were feminine, and
which is not true.
Which is not true at all. So it's the same thing with how often like cooking is kind of lumped in. That's a in the feminine sphere.
Right.
But is there anyone more kind of stereotypically masculine than Gordon Ramsay?
I guess not.
Right.
Bobby Flay.
Right. I mean, like if you think it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But I think that was probably maybe even unconsciously one of the reasons that I shied away from art and music, because it wasn't cool. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
As the chapter goes on, Marrou will talk about the plastic arts in Roman times, if you can see also at the bottom of page 133. Can you read a little bit of that to us, Jeff?
Sure.
Bring us up to speed.
In theory, right up to the late Roman times, the plastic arts had an acknowledged place in advanced education. When Porphyry relates the history of Pythagoras, he takes it for granted that he had drawing lessons. But we have not enough evidence to be sure that instruction in drawing was always given. Probably, having come on the scene so late and having been unable to establish itself firmly in the educational scheme, the new subject was unable to withstand the competition of the various literary subjects, which were then rising rapidly in importance, as I shall show later. So he does talk about how music, and then also gymnastics becomes consumed by literary studies.
Yes.
Yep.
First professionalized and then swamped by book reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
I admire, I'll just say as we go on into this chapter, I admire individuals who maintain amateur devotion to the plastic arts. Do you know persons who paint, sculpt? I have family members, friends of family members who paint, who do some sculpting. You know, they do knitting and crocheting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a plastic art. I don't know.
Yeah.
I admire that.
I do too.
Who keep up a consistent, lifelong interest. And I would have in the past been a little more critical of, well, but what are they making? Is it really worthwhile?
Right.
But you're smiling. But my view has now changed completely.
Yeah.
In the sense that, so what if you don't make anything that others want to consume? You're satisfied. You're pleased with it, and that has value.
Yeah. No, exactly. Is that it does a work of art only have value if it's appreciated by others, right?
I would have said yes.
And part of me, I
still wants to say yes.
Part of me still wants to say yes. Part of me struggles with that.
Yeah.
But no, I think I'm more with kind of where you have come to. My wife she's a crafter. She knits every day.
Yeah.
And she makes incredible things. My oldest son wants to go into.
I nitpick every day.
Well, that's okay. That's
Is that
right.
close?
Clear, you're in the ballpark.
Sorry, your oldest son.
He wants to go right now. He's 16, but he wants to go into art education.
Yeah.
And he draws and he sculpts.
Claymation,
does animation. He does. I mean,
right.
The digital art he does. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there's also that part of me as his dad is like, oh, my son wants to go into art. Like you're looking at a life of poverty.
Right.
So that practical side, is also kind of is whispering in one ear too.
Well, maybe Jeff, you should encourage Ian to read the Irving Stone novel.
Which one?
The Agony and the Ecstasy about the life of Michelangelo.
Right.
Phenomenal novel.
I've never read it myself.
Oh, it's so good.
I need to pick that up.
Has some grown-up portions, but you'll use discretion.
Yeah.
Fantastic novel.
I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next section here. So the next section is on instrumental music, and Marrou talks about how when it came to the classroom, it's the lyre. That was taught.
Yeah. So I think the subheading for this section is, could the ancients shred?
Yeah, nice, exactly, right. Do you use your fingers or do you use the plectrum?
Yeah,
right?
I don't know.
Right. So I thought this was really interesting is that before it was just lyre-based, the aulos, the flute, was also early on part of a standard music education.
And he says specifically that we should stop calling it a flute.
Oh, that's right.
It was an oboe.
An oboe, which, yeah.
You don't care for the oboe?
It's okay.
I think it's hauntingly beautiful. Have you listened to... Well, let me pile on a little bit.
Okay, please, all right, and I'll tell you.
Then you can defend yourself. Have you listened to, the Mission soundtrack?
I know what you're talking about.
With that fantastic oboe solo.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the composer. That's beautiful.
My problem was when I lived in Chicago, I had a roommate for a year who was an oboist with one of the local symphonies. He was very, very good, but he played constantly in his bedroom, and it drove me off a cliff.
Well, the only way to get good at an instrument like that is to apply a little oboe grease.
Okay, Ponzi scheme. I think you're pushing it.
All right,
sir. All right.
So the section opens, and he says, Marrou says, in Greek culture and therefore in Greek education, music was at least as important as gymnastics. To take instrumental music first in the 5th century, to judge by the delightful genre paintings that are to be found on vases signed by Dourdres, Aphronius, Hierdran, and Euthymides, the young Athenians learned to play both the instruments which were essential to ancient music, the lyre and the aulos, which should not be translated so often as it so often is as flute. It was an oboe.
Yes. All right. But it was also
that's a woodwind, right?
Woodwind, a reed instrument.
It has a reed in it, and you moisten the reed, and the reed vibrates rapidly. And then you open and close valves on the resonant cylinder. Is that how it works?
Yes.
Okay.
And the Greeks had the single, but also they had the double. So you're doing it with both
coming
hands.
out of both sides of your mouth.
Yes.
And you had to use your left and right hand.
Right. Kind of like you would on a bass clef and a treble clef on a piano.
Really?
I imagine.
But you have to blow at the same time.
Yes, very difficult.
Okay.
Right. But he talks about how in Athens it kind of fell out of favor, and he mentions this anecdote featuring Alcibiades that may have been one of the dominoes that kind of pushed the whole thing down.
Why don't you read us that anecdote?
So this is from Plutarch's Life of Alcibiades, 2.4. He writes, "At school, he usually paid due heed to his teachers, but he refused to play the flute, holding it to be an ignoble and illiberal thing. The use of the plectrum and the lyre, he argued, wrought no havoc with the bearing and appearance which were becoming to a gentleman. But let a man go to blowing on a flute, and even his own kinsmen could scarcely recognize his features. Moreover, the lyre blended its tones with the voice or song of its master, whereas the flute closed and barricaded the mouth, robbing its master both of voice and speech. Flutes, then, said he, for the sons of Thebes, for they know not how to converse. But we Athenians, as our fathers say, have Athena for foundress and Apollo for patron, one of whom cast the flute away in disgust, and the other flayed the presumptuous flute player." Isn't that great?
So you can't sing along to the sound of the aulos.
That's part of it, but he also says it makes you look stupid.
Yeah.
Right. So there's an anecdote here that I looked up. I had never heard this before, but apparently Athena decided to pick up the flute and play it one day, and she saw a reflection of herself in some water.
And she didn't like it.
She said, no, thank you.
Right.
Right.
And so she flayed the flute player?
Well,
Apollo did.
Apollo flayed Marsyas in the competition, right? So Alcibiades says, it's just not going to do it. Cool. Now, if I think about back in my band days.
Oh, yeah. Didn't you make a lot of crazy faces while you're soloing? Isn't that kind of the hallmark of professional guitarists? Yeah. You're squeezing all of the sound.
That's true.
You're squeezing the sound out of the instrument. You're making it wail, like Stevie Ray Vaughan. And your face goes through all these contortions.
Right, yeah. So
but it doesn't have to.
It does, I guess not. But I guess that doesn't really fit with Alcibiades' theory here. But I remember back. I know we're not supposed to call the aulos a flute,
right?
But if I think back to my band days, there was not one dude that played the flute.
Okay,
it was an instrument that was decidedly, it was unspokenly female.
Yeah. What about the guitar?
The guitar. Well,
what is the guitar?
The guitar. It's the keyboard that you wear.
Oh, so strap it over your shoulder.
So it's like a guitar keyboard.
Yeah, that's not cool either.
Oh, it's so uncool. Jeff, it's kind of a symbol of kind of the ridiculousness of the 80s.
Jeff, I'm not your therapist, but it seems like for much of your life you have been strapped by the expectations of other people and what passes for cool or not.
Well, no, I'm an outside observer.
Oh, okay.
Right. I think all youths are hampered by peer pressure to some degree, right? I think that maybe I was a bit of a late bloomer to following the beat of my own drummer, but I got there.
Right.
But this just
was that the moped days?
Oh, the moped, those were difficult days.
Okay.
Right. So I had a very, have we talked about
a little bit.
Yeah, let's forget about it. But this is kind of me just looking, as in the second half of my existence, looking back. I'm starting to understand why some things were in and why some things were out.
Right.
Not that makes sense.
No, I get it.
That's just the way there was.
Right.
So here, Alcibiades is ditching the flute because it made him look stupid. And also, very clearly from Plutarch's passage, it made him look unmanly.
That's correct.
But playing with a plectrum?
Yeah, leave it to the Thebans to do that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Let them.
We'll solo.
Right.
So to wrap up instrumental music, Marrou says, bottom of 134, to tell the truth, we know very little about how music was taught at this time. There was a special teacher for music. Only rarely did the same person teach literature as well. The instruction seems to have been entirely practical. Greek musical theory had been very advanced from the time of Aristoxenus of Tarentum and was, in fact, one of the finest achievements of the Greek genius. But there was a wide gulf between theory and practice. I think we should just leave it there.
Yeah.
So we move on then to a choral and accompanied singing?
Yes. I thought this was interesting. So again, Marrou admits we don't know a lot about what this sounded like. But the Greeks did not sing with polyphony. They did not have harmony in their singing. And at best, maybe they sang with at octave intervals. It was more kind of chanting and monotone. But being part of a choir was also important because it served a civic function,
right? And
so choirs of young men and young girls would be called to perform at particular festivals or feasts. Mm-hmm. So there was a natural connection to the wider body politic, and not just you're doing this because this is good for your platonic soul.
Yes, very good. So in the middle of 135, he says, quote, "The school examinations in Teos and Magnesia ad Meandrum in the 3rd century AD included a test in accompanied singing, Kytherodia, as well as a lyre solo."
So you had to shred in front of the class?
You did.
Yeah.
Now, as I think back to my youth education, right? Coming up through K-12 public schools out here in rural Michigan. Was there anything similar?
I think you had. Did you do when you took piano lessons? Did you do recitals?
Yes, once a year.
Okay.
Usually in a church.
Yeah.
And I practiced like crazy, and my parents would give me the praise afterward and some ice cream.
Yeah.
And that was
that was about
a big deal.
Yeah.
Had my little moment in the sun.
Right.
That was nice.
Yeah.
And in school, we'd have school plays, but they were never musicals. We didn't sing.
Did you have talent shows?
Not until high school.
Yeah. Same here.
And for talent show in high school, I did some lip syncing.
You did?
Yes.
What did you?
And I won.
What? Tell me. Okay.
I'm not going to tell
Come
you.
on.
No,
you can't just drop that.
But I won.
You won.
Yeah.
Well,
I and another guy, we won. But one guy dressed himself up as Eddie Van Halen and played a guitar solo.
Mimed it or actually?
He didn't. No, he actually played it.
Yes.
It wasn't Van Halen. And I think he was playing it all on one string. So it was just a one-string thing.
Yeah.
But the sound was good, and he looked the part, and he was so into it that the crowd loved it.
Yeah.
It was all...
He sold it.
It was all personality. Musically, I don't think there was a lot there.
Right.
His last was Jason Rhodes, maybe, I think his name was. People just went crazy.
Amazing how much that can make up.
Yeah, he had the bandana.
Oh, yeah.
He had the whole thing.
Nice.
And he sold it. So,
Fantastic.
did you have... talent shows?
We had talent shows, yep.
But not as a part of your final grade.
No.
A test and accompanied singing, the Rodia.
I mean the from the music majors that I knew in college,
right.
that you performing.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that was your exam.
That's
right?
true.
You had to perform a particular piece in front of your teacher, and
You'd have a senior recital,
exactly,
vocal recital or instrumental.
So I think this definitely goes on. Yeah.
So, Jeff, you mentioned the religious festivals and so forth. Can you tell us something about the corregos and the corregia and so forth?
Right. So these kinds of competitions and performances were organized in a similar way that we know that perhaps the better known tragic competitions,
right?
Sophocles, Euripides during the Dionysia celebration. So a corregos was a wealthy citizen that was tapped by the democracy, who basically says, "You're organizing this, you're paying for it. You're going to conduct the rehearsals, and if your team wins, you can raise up a monument to yourself."
So he had to fund the civic theater, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
The difference between that and today,
yes,
is that, to my knowledge, today it's not competitive.
Well, I was thinking about this. I mean, we do have kind of there's these reality shows like
but people don't consider that art.
Well, do they or don't they? Right.
My point is that if it worked in Antiquity,
Yeah.
where you would go to the wealthy citizen and you'd say to the wealthy citizen, you're funding this team,
Yep.
and if your team wins at the musical competition, then you can dedicate this bronze statue of yourself,
Right.
you know, bestriding the world like a colossus. Mm-hmm. But today, it's not done that way.
No, not really. Unless you see some kind of corollary with something like the Grammys,
I suppose.
Right? You know, I think we tend not to think about art as inherently competitive.
Right.
Everything in ancient Athens was centered around the agon, publicly, right?
They compete for dollars,
Yeah.
but they don't compete necessarily for honor, except in things like the Grammys and so forth. But often those are not the most popular.
No.
Right? The ones that win for artistic value are not the blockbuster hits.
Right. And nobody really cares about the Grammys anymore.
I don't know. But James Cameron, what was his big his blockbuster sellers? I mean, there's Titanic. But then there's another one that made a lot of money. Oh, the Avatar movies, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think the critics didn't care so much for those, but the audiences love them.
Right.
So
yeah,
dollar competition, but not honor.
I think that's a good distinction. I talk about this when I talk about theater in my myth class. It's the same kind of thing as that. You know, we tend not to, when you go to a play, you tend to say, well, let's wait around for the second play and see which one wins.
Right.
In that, you know, the Oscars are putting movies up against each other. Maybe a slight corollary there, but yeah, it was the focus was on the agon, on the struggle, on the competition.
So at the very bottom of 135, Marrou gives us an example of a choregic monument. Mm-hmm. I want to read this. A number of these graceful choregic monuments, like you said, Jeff, the choregos who sponsored it gets to dedicate a monument to himself. These have lasted, says Marrou, right up to our own day. The best known being the one erected by Lysicrates in 335 or 334. He says,
are you picturing the one he's talking about?
No, have I seen it?
Yes.
Where is it?
Right. It's not far from the Theater of Dionysus off the Acropolis. It's in the little park by Byron's house.
Oh, yes.
It's a little cylindrical monument.
Yes, I know it now.
Yep.
Okay.
That's this one. Yep.
So it says, Lysicrates, son of Lysitheides, of the deme of Cicina, being Choregos, the Achamontis tribe, was the winner in the children's competition. Oboe, Theon, teacher, Lysiades of Athens, choir master, Euinatos.
Yeah.
The guy that ran the concession. Is he listed too?
Maybe that inscription has been lost.
Maybe that
I wish I knew
lost.
that guy's name. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to imagine that in the heyday,
Right.
Athens was filled
With these sorts
with
of
these
things.
types of monuments that people would have seen them anywhere, everywhere, but just a handful just survive today.
Yeah. Do you have any desire to be a patron of the arts, or is that mostly expressed through buying candy bars from your kids and so forth when they're involved in different activities?
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to reach a financial level of being a patron of the arts.
Well, you could patronize at a very small dollar amount if you need to.
I buy a ticket to a show.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Right. So he also Marrou talks about how choirs were often used in public celebrations and
Right.
festivals. So let me read a bit from the bottom of page 136, where he says, "We have already seen how important it was for school children and members of young men's clubs to take part officially as a matter of social duty and legal obligation in the religious ceremonies. And we shall soon see what a large place these festivals had in the school calendar. It is clear, therefore, that the ceremonies played a considerable part in the education of Hellenistic youth. But it does not necessarily follow that choral singing was one of the main subjects of the curriculum." So he talks about how it was, there's that tension between what's practical, what does the city
Right.
need, and what does the soul
Right.
need, right? So this reminded me of when I was in band. One of our obligations was we would always march in the local Memorial Day parade,
Okay.
right? It wasn't why we were in band, but that was like, okay, this is part of your civic duty that you can perform. And so maybe that's
an analogy you could find. to
yeah,
this
and so
kind
maybe
of
there was some kind of overlap there, or where what the schools was doing was kind of bled over into what the city expected of you.
Right. So we have a local sports team here in Grand Rapids. We have several, actually, but I'm not thinking of the Griffins, the hockey team.
Okay.
Named by our colleague Ken Bratt.
That's
by the
right.
way.
That's right.
I am thinking of the baseball team, the Whitecaps.
Yes.
And you can audition to sing the national anthem for one of their games.
Oh, can you really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Maybe we should do that sometime.
Do a duet?
Yeah. What do you think?
Man.
Can we pull it off? One aulos each?
Right. Yeah. we could do it. An aulos duet. Just
Okay.
Terrify the crowd.
Couple of oboes.
Right.
What I want to point out about this page, 136, is that it illustrates a point I made earlier. There are 16 footnotes on this page. Spanning everything from inscriptions to a fragment of Ephorus to Polybius and so on and so forth. So as we were saying at the beginning, the chapter is kind of thin because there's not a lot of evidence that survives, but Marrou has marshaled all of it.
Yes.
And I think that's quite impressive.
Yes. Agreed. Right. So my complaints about when he says there's little known about this subject, he's building his argument on a fairly solid evidence-based foundation.
Oh, he's doing the best he can, I would say.
Yep.
Speaking of marshaling evidence,
yes,
it's time for the ads. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the good folks of Ratio Coffee. Jeff, you're a coffee drinker, am I right?
I am.
Okay.
Yep, it's one of my favorite parts of the day.
Yep. Are you a cream guy? You put some cream in there?
Straight black.
Straight black each time?
Every time.
Aren't you worried a little bit about the strength of the coffee? It's going to knock you prone or something?
No, not at all.
No?
In fact, the stronger the better.
All right.
Yeah. How about you?
I used to be a strictly black coffee drinker.
Yep.
Liked it real strong. But the last couple of years, I have been enjoying whole whipping cream.
Oh.
The really rich stuff. And so now I enjoy chewing my coffee.
Nice. Exactly. Yeah. Attacking it with a knife and fork.
That's correct.
Right.
It's so delicious. But the method I use, if you must know,
yes,
is that you put some cream in the first mug. And so the first bit, it's a large proportion cream. Mm-hmm. But then as you continue to pour from your hulking flagon that does not have beneath it the scorch pad or the Kindle brick, the ratio of coffee to cream goes up. So by the time you get to the end, it's pretty much black coffee.
Gotcha. Interesting. Wow, you certainly thought this through.
Oh, I have.
Right, but what are we talking about here? We're talking about ratio.
Yes, we have. Yes, we are.
Yeah, so I have the ratio 8. You also have the ratio 8.
Yes, I've never had the 6, but you were a 6 user previously.
Yep, loved it. I loved that being able to graduate up to the 8 just this morning. Wonderful smell wafting through the house.
Right.
It's a great way to wake up. And so I bring a cup of coffee to my wife upstairs. She wakes up. She likes it with a shot of cream in there.
Oh, she likes the cream.
She does.
So what's the secret to the great flavor that ratio is able to achieve?
I think it has a lot to do with the bloom stage.
The bloom stage.
Where
this is not the Alan Bloom stage.
No.
Or the Judy Bloom stage.
No, this is the bloom stage where the CO2 is off gassed.
Okay.
And then it's the putting the water through 200 degrees.
Yes.
Through the Fibonacci head.
That's correct.
And down,
showers the grounds gently.
Yep.
They drip away
and into the hulking flagon.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you use the glass carafe or do you use the aluminum and stainless steel contraption?
I use that. I usually get up earlier than anybody in the house, so I want to make sure that coffee stays hot for my wife when she gets up a bit later.
Any of your sons drinking coffee these days?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet, but
more for you.
More for me, but they've learned kind of where what works and where quality coffee comes from.
Yes. So let's say the listeners are thinking, I'm convinced I'd like to up my coffee game.
Yep.
Jeff, what would you suggest they do?
They should go to ratiocoffee.com and see these wonderful machines, the ratio 8, the ratio 6, and coming soon, very soon, the ratio 4. Mm-hmm. Tell what's the 4 all about?
Well, the 4 is the first affordable and beautiful half-batch pour-over coffee machine. It's the smallest brewer yet that Ratio has released. It's an agile, sleek machine. Mm-hmm. It puts out between 5 and 20 ounces of coffee per batch, which is enough for 1 to 2 reasonably sized cups or a big travel mug. I have a big travel mug.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be perfect for me. It brooms with a bloom cycle, in 4 minutes or less.
Very nice.
What I'm looking forward to is that the water tank is removable. Mm-hmm. So now I can take it over to my tap, to my water filter, wherever I need to go.
Yep.
I can go to some artesian well and bring it back and set it on its stand, and boom, I'm ready to go.
Ready to go. So the 4, you're on board.
I'm on board.
It's coming.
It's in the mail. I was an early adopter.
Fantastic.
It also has a BPA-free water tank, a hand-blown glass carafe designed in the USA, and it has a 5-year warranty, class-leading 5-year warranty.
Fantastic. So coming soon, we'll hope to have a contest, a giveaway sometime soon, maybe.
That's right.
On the podcast. But if you're interested in any of these things, listener, go to ratiocoffee.com. Find the machine you want, put it in your grocery basket, and put in this coupon code. Dave, what is it?
It's ANCO X5.
X5. What's the X stand? That's tough.
Well, the X stands for Xerxes.
Oh, really? Did he enjoy coffee?
Well, it's a little known fact that Herodotus believed Xerxes invaded Greece in order to avenge the loss that his father Darius suffered.
Yes.
But actually, Xerxes invaded Greece because they were out of good coffee in Persia.
Is that right?
Yeah, so he had to see, what are they brewing in Athens? Maybe they got a ratio there. It didn't work out so well for him.
Yes, no, it did not.
He had to beat it back, to the Starbucks in Tehran or wherever he was based.
But that was the original
Persepolis.
impetus.
But that was the, it's a little known fact.
Interesting.
So ANCOX as in Xerxes, and then the number 5.
And that will get you 15% off your entire order.
Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the wonderful folks at Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, these guys have been with us since pretty much the beginning of this humble little podcast, which we started over 4 years ago now. They are one of these groups that is keeping the flame alive. They are purveyors of fine volumes of translations and academic works in the classical field, as well as all other corners of academia. And they are one of these rare companies that are able to thread the needle of producing something that's very affordable, but also something that's attractive and of very high quality.
Absolutely.
Right. So I love it. I love the Lombardo translations that I have on my shelf that I've used in class.
Iliad, Odyssey, Ovid's Metamorphoses.
Mm-hmm.
We should do a couple of vignettes from Ovid again before too long.
We're due.
Those are fun.
Yep.
Those are a lot of fun.
Yes. So many of the texts that you can see on their website are, you'll be astounded by the prices. And you also be amazed at the number of different translations of the same work by different authors. There's so much that you can find there. So go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Search through their incredible catalog.
And it's not just classics, Jeff.
It's not.
It's modern and ancient philosophy. It's South American studies. It's Far East studies. The history of the warrior in Japan, right? It's samurai. That's what I'm looking for. So much on offer there. Such a wide catalog.
Yes. So don't hesitate. Go to hacketpublishing.com. Find the books you want. Put them in your grocery basket. And if you put in this coupon code, AN2024, that's AN plus the current year, that will get you, Dave, two things. What are they?
20% off,
Yes.
which you can't get from any river-based bookseller.
No.
And free shipping. So the books come right to your door. You break open the package. You take the books out. You sit down with a cup of coffee, and you're in a kind of a literary paradise.
Exactly. So check it out.
Okay, Jeff, as we get back into it, it's time for some dancing.
Yes. Oh, man.
Time to cut the rug.
Right.
Trip the light.
You're a big dancer?
No.
No? Never?
I don't know. Don't ask my kids. The only time I dance is to embarrass them.
Yeah.
And it's so successful.
Yes, that's very satisfying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Did you go to the winter formals?
I did. They were terrible. I went to the winter formals and the informals.
Right.
I don't know. It's so brutal to be a kid at that age.
It is.
And the interaction with members of the opposite sex.
Right,
you know?
right.
If you could take out of, I like music and athletics, right? Which is kind of what dancing is.
I guess so, right? Yeah.
But it wasn't much about that at that stage.
Right,
So there's a lot of schlocky top 40 hits and,
yes.
being very uncomfortable.
I guess I'm right there with you. Yeah, it still sends a shiver up my spine.
That's
when I
right.
think back on that. Yeah.
They had those at the Christian schools you went to?
Well, I was at an era where kind of the balance was starting to tip, right? So
Okay.
It was still kind of conservative enough that the school wasn't sponsoring dances.
Okay.
But
You had to fight for your right to party?
exactly right. Well, it's striking that song was very popular when I was in high school. But there was
Twisted Sister?
there was a group of hip parents
Right.
that would organize a dance off campus.
Right. And they were heroes, probably.
Of course,
Right?
yes. And so we loved going, but now you look back and you say,
What
just
in the world?
cringe.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So that is not the kind of dancing that's being discussed here in Marrou's chapter. Take us into it, will you, Jeff,
Yeah,
please?
so the way that Marrou presents this is that dancing was it was never a central feature of education. It
Right.
was choral singing was important. It was important to a community, and when you have music being played and you have people singing together, dancing kind of follows. And so it was an addendum, it was kind of an add-on
Right.
to other artistic expressions that were considered more foundational to education.
Right. Inseparable from choral singing.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And what I understand about the chorus in tragedy, as in comedy, is that the chorus would have its strophe and its antistrophe,
Right.
which were choreographed movements that they would make, right? So choreo means actually to dance,
Yes.
not to sing.
Right.
So the chorus was named after the fact that it had to go through elaborate and pre-staged, choreography,
Right.
and then the singing was secondary.
Yeah. And then there's this detail that I always find fascinating about how in both ancient Greece and Rome, where these kinds of arts become specialized, it's dancing stops being an addendum to education and becomes kind of a part of a professional show.
Right.
And where any respectable Athenian or Roman would go to the theater and appreciate what the dancer was doing, but they wouldn't be caught dead doing it themselves.
Right.
That where you, I think the way that Marrou puts it, you admire the art, but you despise the person.
Yes.
And so the dancing becomes, and as we'll see, playing music also becomes
Right.
kind of cordoned off into that part of society.
Right.
We respect who people are really good at it, but I would never want to do that myself.
Right. Very different, though, than today, right? Because
Right.
now their entire system's set up to allow you to become like that person.
Exactly.
Karaoke.
Yep. Karaoke or American Idol.
That's right.
It's-
The Voice.
Yeah. It's very much the opposite
Right.
of that. Yeah.
You're supposed to emulate such persons.
Yeah. So dancing, as far as its importance for a community, Marrou talks about like in the Panathenaic competitions, the big festival for Athena, the summer festival in Athens every year, that there was Pyrrhic dancing. There was kind of war dances. They'd have teams or troops from each of the 10 tribes doing dances in full armor.
Wow.
And there were competitions and prizes for that, but it doesn't last very long. And Marrou talks about how when you get into the Roman era, the only people still doing that kind of thing are the Spartans, and kind of doing it for tourist tokens.
Yeah. So there was nothing like ballet.
No,
there was no highly developed, culturally rich,
right,
pursuit of a very athletic sort of activity.
No, I don't think so. But so not a kind of differentiation between like high art and low art.
Right.
Did you watch? We talked about this. You watched some of the Olympics this year.
Oh yeah,
did you see the breakdancing?
Yes,
was
I did.
So
ray gun from Australia.
Oh yeah, right. Of course, that was the big story.
Yes, that was funny.
Right. But I mean that's an attempt on some level to
You're right.
to elevate a street art
Yes.
to an elite competition.
Yes. And I don't know which is, I have no objection to it, honestly, but I mean, I have some objections to ray gun, but I don't know which part is more surprising, the trying to elevate it to the world stage or the making it competitive. Perhaps this kind of dancing has always been competitive and I'm just well behind the curve in terms of keeping up on it.
I guess so. I mean, you see more of that kind of thing. Well, I mean, in like the Winter Olympics, ice skating and is a kind of dance, right? That is judged and scored.
Sure.
Right? Sure. I guess that falls into that kind of category. But so there was competitive dancing amongst the ancient Greeks, but it was not a kind of a linchpin of artistic education. Yeah.
So at the bottom of 137, Marrou says, by the time of the empire, meaning the Roman Empire, apart from a few local exceptions, in Ionia, for example, where Dionysiac dancing remained in favor among the aristocracy.
Those Ionians were dancing fools.
Dancing had been eliminated from liberal culture and become a mere show. Very popular, but something which no man of the world would ever think of doing himself.
Right.
He left it to professionals, admiring their talents, but despising them as persons.
That's the phrase.
Isn't that odd?
It is really quite odd.
Can you think of any sort of analog to contemporary life and culture?
I think that the one thing that popped into my mind is I can't ever remember as going to a circus.
Yeah.
And seeing just some kind of the weirder performative things that a circus performer would do, and you just say, "Wow,
sword swallowing."
Right, and being amazed at that, but not walking out of the tent thinking, "I want to be a sword swallower one day." Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. And we did it.
All I can think of is certain kinds of stage performances. Apparently, the fear of public speaking, right, agoraphobia, is stronger than the fear of death for some people.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
and so stand-up comedy is a kind of high pressure, super intensity public speaking.
Yes.
It is scripted, I think the majority of it, maybe all of it, but it's something people admire, but they say there's no way you could pay me to get up in front of others and try to do that.
Right.
That's as close as I can come to an analog.
Yeah, interesting.
So the close of the chapter, Jeff, from 138 on to the end, is the decline of music in culture and education. A shorter chapter for Marrou, probably based on the scarcity of source material.
Right. He talks about the one inscription that tells us that a particular school, like how many teachers they had for the gymnasium, how many teachers were teaching literature, and then there was just the one teacher assigned to music. Yeah,
I was hoping you were going to do another cocktail napkin calculation for us here, because there is some information about how much money they earned and whether or not it was profitable to be a music teacher.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I mean, he talks about how it was, I think it's in evidence of one, that the music teacher was paid more than the literature teachers.
Yeah.
But he goes on to say that I think Marrou blames this for part of its decline is that music had become so specialized.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't something that was being taught to everybody at every stage in your education. But if a kid showed some talent at a certain age and you were willing to dedicate your life to it, well, maybe then you can specialize in this. And so it was lucrative for that one teacher, but it wasn't for everybody.
Have you ever given music lessons?
No, I mean I've shown my boys kind of the basic chords on the guitar and piano.
Right, and you bought them some drums that you're mostly playing.
Yes, exactly.
You've taken some music lessons, right?
1 year piano lessons.
Okay. So in the middle of page 138, Marrou says the rules of this charter. This is a charter of the cities, was to show that to do the teaching in all the schools, there were 3 teachers of literature, 2 for gymnastics, but only 1 for music. So 3 lit, 2 athletics, and 1 music. It is true that he got particularly good pay. This is where I was hoping you'd whip out a cocktail napkin.
Yeah.
700 drachmae a year, whereas his colleagues only got between 500 and 600. He was a specialist, but something of a man apart. For instance, he did not teach all the age groups, but only the older boys, for their last 2 years at school and then at the ephebia. Whilst they were at school, he taught them the 2 ways of playing the lyre, with and without the plectrum, the pick. And also he taught them music, ta musica, which may mean either mathematical theory or singing. That's a surprising disjunct. And when they became ephebes, he taught them music only. And so in Teos, the boys only learned the lyre for 2 years altogether, which almost certainly would have seemed unsatisfactory 2 or 3 centuries earlier.
Yeah.
So decline.
And then Marrou suggests, just below this, he muses that maybe one of the reasons music hangs on at all is because it had been folded in with mathematics.
Yeah.
Like the modes of music or the intervals of music are...
Theories of the strings and so forth.
And maybe because of its connection to mathematics, it hangs on, not because it was seen as something inherently valuable in and of itself. Yeah.
Right. So what is Aristotle's solution to some of these problems? I'm looking at page 139 as we get ready to wrap it up.
Yeah.
About how music should be taught. What does Aristotle give us?
Yeah, let me read a little bit of this. So Marrou says, Aristotle's own solution was very subtle. Just as physical education, he said, far from trying to breed champions, should aim at the child's harmonious development. So musical education should renounce any idea of teaching students to compete with professionals and simply aim at training intelligent amateurs who would only study the technical side of music insofar such as immediate practical experience help to develop their taste. I am fully in agreement with Aristotle.
Yeah.
Right?
And it seems to me that whether or not he's right, it's the regnant view today.
Yeah.
You know, why study a little bit of music? Well, so that you can appreciate the professionals. Why do some athletics in school? Why have a gym class? I have to tell you, my knowledge of the rules of many sports are gained from gym class.
Yeah. Yeah, like without a doubt.
How, what are the rules for badminton? Now, I don't play badminton, but I learned them in gym class because we did a 2-week unit on badminton. And you could replicate that into many other areas.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe gym class had some value. Maybe all those piano lessons, my time in choir, maybe they had value in that they contributed to why I now enjoy music so much.
Yeah, no.
What do you think?
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. Kind of the idea of fostering the intelligent amateur.
Yeah.
I think that's, I like that a lot.
Is it possible to appreciate things in which you have no ability?
Well, of course.
I would think so.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking I never tried to sculpt anything. But when I go to Rome and I see the work by Bernini and Michelangelo and so forth, I'm overwhelmed.
Yes. Yeah, same here.
But I've never tried
sculpting
at all.
Right.
And I don't know if, finger painting and paint by number at all contributed to my enjoyment of the great Renaissance masters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couldn't have hurt.
Couldn't have hurt. No. I mean, I kind of like the idea that there's a bit of mysticism behind all of that. You never know, when you pull the pin on a grenade somewhere in your youth, that it explodes later somewhere down the line, and how all those things are connected. I would like to think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a little bit of Plato and Aristotle at the bottom of 139, Jeff, and then skip to the end of the chapter, which I think has a nice little parting quote for us.
Sure.
So Marrou says, it was not only from the technical point of view that the tradition handed down by Plato and Aristotle proved archaic in its effect. It also helped to perpetuate ingenuous ideas about the efficacy of music as a moral agent, a personal and social discipline. Throughout the Greco-Roman period, the same edifying stories were repeated of how, by a mere change of mode or rhythm, Pythagoras had managed to cool the erotic ardor of an intoxicated young man. How Pythagoras again, or perhaps it was his disciple Clinias, or Empedocles, or some other great musician of bygone times, Damon perhaps, used to get rid of his bad temper by playing the lyre, and so on and so on. The heroes of the Trojan War had even managed to keep their wives faithful while they were away fighting by choosing the right musician.
I'd like to know more about that.
You'd like to know what they did?
Yeah.
Just play this while I'm gone, and everything will be fine until I get back. Barry Manilow?
Yeah.
You mentioned Barry Manilow earlier.
Right, exactly. That would kill the mood anytime.
Let's move on.
Right.
Family show. So page 141, maybe the final paragraph there, Jeff.
Yeah. Let's get there. So Marrou ends the chapter with these lines. Gymnastics and music were the two archaic elements in Greek education, and both were declining in the Hellenistic age. Education was becoming predominantly literary. It is in the school of literature that we shall see it at its truest and liveliest. And so that's a little nod to apparently where we're going to go with this.
The next chapter is going to be on literature.
All right.
But hey, we have to get out of here, don't we?
We do.
Is there any kind of Rhymes with Dead Poet Society beating down the door, trying to get in here?
Have we exhausted the?
Of course not.
Right. I'm hearing some stirrings up there.
Are you?
Any idea of who
No.
those? No.
The Street Cred Poet Society?
Oh, really?
The people who recite poetry only if it's, popular and acceptable to others on the street.
If they're considered hip for doing that, right?
Maybe they're trying to get in here.
Maybe they're upset with our lack of street cred down here.
Oh boy,
man! Well, whoever they are,
what is the opposite of street cred?
Just lameness.
Street debt.
Street debt.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So whoever they are, they're upset. They want to get in here, so we've got to get out. But before we do, we got some people to thank.
Yes, indeed.
As always, we got to thank Mishka for turning this stuff around and doing such a wonderful job in a short period of time.
Making us sound good.
Yep. These musicians, we got Ken Tamplin, we got Scott Van Zen.
Screaming guitar, the composition of the bass, and Ken's playing the drums there.
Right.
And the bumper music, right?
Yep.
I think there's maybe a keytar involved in that somewhere.
I don't think any keytar, but no, I think that you can hear the
bass.
The bass, and you can hear kind of the great plectrum work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's
Appreciate all
fantastic.
that stuff.
And Dave, I'm sure there are many listeners out there that would love to learn some Greek. They would love to learn some Latin, and I hear that you can help them. I
can. Let me tell you a very brief story about my time in Texas. One of the students in my spoken Latin class, a man named Annaeus, Annaeus, took his name after Seneca, I think. Mm-hmm. A fine Latin student, and I don't remember his last name, so I'm protecting his identity. And I said, "So, Annaeus, what's your story, right? Yeah, you seem like a fine Latin student." He said, "Well, I have a degree in this." It was something like engineering, something very profitable. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, that's impressive." And he said, "And I'm just studying this for the fun of it." And I said, there have been in the history of classic scholarship, you probably know this, the greatest contributions have often been made by people who were total amateurs, right? Michael Ventris,
right?
Heinrich Schliemann,
yes.
David Packard, and the list goes on. These are persons who were studying Greek and Latin not to turn it into a career, but because they loved it,
right?
And I was trying to encourage this fine student, in his avocation. So if you're one out there who thinks this Greek and Latin stuff is fun, how do I learn it? Go to mossmethod.com and check out my Greek program. You can also go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. That's Lingua Latina per se illustrata. Latin teaches itself, and I can take you from
neophyte to erudite, right?
Thank you, Jeff. That's right. You can go from little or no knowledge of these beautiful classical languages to a very sophisticated knowledge. I've spent over 30 years studying and teaching these languages, and now I'm prepared to share that knowledge with you. Maybe better programs available, I can't say, but I'm very confident that there is not a better value. So in terms of what you pay for what you get, it's a good deal.
Fantastic. So mossmethod.com, latinperdiem.com/LLPSI.
That's correct. And I would just like to say, if I may, Jeff, that at my YouTube channel, we now have 2119 free lessons on all Greek and Latin authors practically that you can imagine. So please check that out.
Fantastic. Hey, if you want to get in touch with us, if you want a shout out, if you consider yourself a Will or
a Tom, you got a corrigendum,
if you got a complaint, drop us a note. You can write to Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V.
Or write to Jeff. He's the happy one. He's the gentle-hearted fellow who's going to love to receive your correspondence. No gall, no bitterness with him.
Good cop.
Yes, Jeff at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V, Navseam. Jeff, what if they want to get a T-shirt or a hat?
They should go to adnauseam.com. Again, don't forget that V in there. Go to our Lurch with Merch section.
Yep.
And take a look at what we got. I mean, they got the colors, right? Yeah, that for the T-shirts, the black with the orange. It's perfect for the time of year.
The Quai Nocent, Docent. What hurts teaches. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That nice Erasmian tag.
Yes.
And we'd love to see you out there showing that you are taking in the classics.
And keeping them down.
Yeah, I'm the happy one too, Jeff,
yes,
by the way. It didn't come out quite right.
Right, no. You've got plenty of mirth over there.
That's correct.
Right.
And speaking of mirth.
Yes.
As we close out this episode, we're going to have a little bit different here. Outro music.
Oh, we are. Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
So previously we played one of your tunes, which was Drama Queen about the late...
Janis Joplin.
That's correct. And so my friend Michael Kornelis many years ago composed a song called Satan Get Behind Me. And it's not actually as religiously themed as it sounds, although it does have a religious theme. It's really comparing the character of Achilles from the Iliad to the general struggles of the Christian life. I think it's quite charming. Now, if your kid's listening, there is one line in there which Michael says something like, "How does it feel to walk this goddamned world?" And I think that's fine because he's making a specific theological point.
Yes.
That I think is a valid one, that, the Lord cursed the ground. But anyway, if you listen to it and you think, whoa, I didn't see that coming, you've been warned.
There we go.
And after Michael sent it to me, I added some harmonica to it. So here's my artistic contribution, you might say.
Very cool.
Jeff, you have our gustatory parting shot, do you not?
I do. And this goes from my go-to, one of my favorite comedians.
So funny.
Jim Gaffigan, who said or wrote, "I don't know much about grammar, but I think kale salad is what they call a double negative."
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
A snake bites your heel. You try your best to charm him. The wound doesn't heal. It's overwhelmed with venom. So how does it feel to own that goddamned world? Don't say you'll give me everything. All I want is to be unbound. Oh, Satan, get behind me. Everything you give me ties me down. A bow gets your heel. You try your best to harm them with a sword and a shield. Bright eyes to capture Helen, but all that you steal is that goddamned world. Don't say you'll give me everything. All I want is to